Central will be going over our 2020 XFL Week 5 rankings and week number 4. Certainly was the craziest week that the XFL has seen so far. We saw 4 crazy games, and it really jumbled up the rankings going into week number 5. And we're going to be starting off with our new number 8 team, which is going to be the Seattle Dragons. This may come as a bit of a surprise to you, but nonetheless, this team is suddenly 1-3. They lost to the BattleHawks last week, 16-23, and they moved down 2 spots from last week's ranking of 6. And considering their only win is against the Tampa Bay Vipers, which, let me tell you, the Vipers are certainly improving a ton right now. Looking at that, it just doesn't look very good for the Dragons, and also they've got a bit of a weird quarterback situation going on right now. Of course, they benched Brandon Silvers. Well, he had some action in week number 4, but certainly they had Daniels take over the main quarterback role in this game last week. He was 5 for 10, 100 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. And he also led the team in rushing, 7 attempts for 64 yards. And their top wide receiver was Moore, who had 1 reception for 57 yards. So really, there were no big playmakers on this team last week, and that's certainly a reason why they lost last week. But nonetheless, it was a little bit surprising for me to see Brandon Silvers get benched. Of course, he really hasn't played all that terrible from a viewpoint of this season. I mean, it's a little bit surprising to see them go with a quarterback change this far into the season already. But nonetheless, it is the XFL, and who knows what could happen at this point in the season. But nonetheless, looking ahead for the Dragons next week, they got a really tough game against the Roughnecks. That is going to be on the road on March 7th. And they are currently on a losing streak of 2. They lost to the Renegades last week too. So certainly it's been a tough schedule for the Dragons. And it'll be really interesting to see whether they can beat Houston or not. If they beat Houston, the entire XFL is going to be absolutely it'll be a crazy occasion if the Dragons win next week. Nonetheless, number 7 is now going to be the Tampa Bay Vipers. They finally move out of the number 8 position. They've been at number 8 for all of the rankings that I've done so far in the XFL. And now they're number 7 this week. They're 1-3. They finally got their first win, and it was a banger. They shut out the Defenders 25-0 last week, and that was a very impressive win in my opinion. And considering on February 22nd, looking back at that game, they played the Roughnecks at home, and the Roughnecks, considering they're the only undefeated team remaining right now, they nearly beat them. I mean, it was 27-34, and it certainly looked like the Vipers could have gotten a win there in that game. And considering they had a shutout against the Defenders this week, I think the Vipers are bound to have a really good last part of the season. So watch out for them. They could pull off some pretty impressive upsets for sure. So that's why they're moving up to number 7, is based off of the fact that they're really improving right now. And I think they've got a legit chance against the Wildcats on the road here this coming week. But nonetheless, stat-wise, last week, Cornelius once again had another good game, 24 for 31, 211 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. So I do expect Tampa Bay to go with him for the rest of the season. Top running back was Smith, 24 attempts for 122 yards, and their top wide receiver was Williams, 7 receptions for 72 yards. New number 6 is going to be the DC Defenders, and this team is absolutely free-falling right now. They've only scored 9 points in the previous 2 games, and they've had 2 major blowouts in the last 2 games as well. And also not to good teams. I mean, the Wildcats really certainly are not the best team in the XFL, and considering they lost to the Vipers, they actually got shut out by the Vipers. Certainly the worst team in the XFL at the time. 0-25. I mean, this DC Defenders team has got a ton of problems. And certainly looking at, the first couple weeks of the season, they were 2-0. And this Defenders team certainly looked like they were going to run or make a big run for the championship. And now sitting at 2-2 after a shutout to the Vipers, it's a little bit questionable for the Defenders right now. Their quarterback, Cardale Jones, has not been playing well at all. He had 4 interceptions last week, and this week he had 1. But he was 9 for 22, which is absolutely horrible. And that's certainly very concerning. It wouldn't surprise me to see them try out another quarterback next week. Their top rusher was Pumphrey, 7 attempts for 34 yards, and their top in receiving was also Pumphrey, 3 receptions for 32 yards. Number 5 is the LA Wildcats, and this team has really been up and down. They had a bad loss to the Guardians last week, 14-17, but really, the Wildcats statistically did do better than the Guardians by a long shot. So it is a little bit surprising to see LA lose this game. But yeah, certainly stat-wise, this team was good. Quarterback Johnson, 25 for 40, 325 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And the top running back was Karras, 5 attempts for 25 yards, so really he didn't do a whole lot. But their wide receiver McBride had a huge game, 8 receptions for 127 yards and 1 touchdown. And looking ahead for the Wildcats next week, they got the Vipers at home. So certainly that should be an interesting game, especially with the Vipers being on the rise right now. That game will really have a big impact on the rest of the season for both those teams, just to see where they're at. But yeah, the Wildcats are now 1-3 as well. We get a lot of 1-3 teams right now. Number 4 is going to be the New York Guardians, and this team certainly I do not think deserves a number 4 position, but really 4 through 8. I mean, when you got the Guardians, Wildcats, Defenders, Vipers, Dragons, etc. I mean, these 5 teams really could go in any order. I mean, no doubt about it. There's a big gap between 4 and 3, but just because the Guardians are 2-2 right now, they've got 2 wins. I think that's going to be the reason why I put them at number 4. And also, they had a good win against the Wildcats last week, 17-14. That also influenced my decision to put them at number 4. Nonetheless, they got a quarterback now. Perez was 18 for 26, 150 yards, and 1 touchdown. So that was a pretty impressive performance by Perez, and I do expect the New York Guardians to go with him for now. It'll be interesting to see whether they stick with him in the long run. Top running back was Victor, 18 attempts for 82 yards, and his top wide receiver was Pearson, 5 receptions for 34 yards. And next week they got a date with the Renegades on the road in Dallas, so that should be an interesting game there as well, considering the Renegades are probably one of the best teams in the XFL right now, which they are next at number 3. And they lost the Roughnecks last week, 20-27. And they are now 2-2 themselves. Last week they were number 3 as well, and I could not move them down after that loss to the Roughnecks. Of course, Houston is a out of the ordinary team right now. Certainly, they're playing very well. They're the only undefeated team remaining, and considering the Renegades played them close, they had a decent game against them. That's why they're still at number 3. Landry Jones didn't have all that great of a game. 25 for 38, 205 yards, 1 touchdown. I mean, looking at the 205 yards and 1 touchdown, it's pretty impressive. But he had 3 interceptions to go with it, which certainly is not something that you want. Top running back was Dunbar, 9 attempts for 48 yards and 1 touchdown. And their top wide receiver was Nagel, 6 receptions for 76 yards. And looking at next week, they got the Guardians at home on March 7th. So that should be an interesting game there as well, considering the Guardians certainly are playing pretty well right now. Number 2 is going to be the St. Louis BattleHawks, and this team no doubt should be at number 2 in my opinion. They were at number 2 last week as well, and last week they beat the Dragons of Seattle 23-16. Their current record is now 3-1. Top quarterback their quarterback was Tamu, 20 for 27, 264 yards and 1 touchdown, and their top rusher was also Tamu, 16 attempts for 63 yards. So he is certainly playing very well, and certainly he could also be a big contender for being the MVP of the XFL right now. He's been playing very well and very consistently as well. Top wide receiver was DeMornay Pearsonell, 5 receptions for 71 yards and 1 touchdown. And next week they got the Defenders on the road, and certainly that looks like it will be an easy win right now. But nonetheless, if the Defenders can bounce back, that'd be a huge win for them. But yeah, the BattleHawks are certainly looking like one of the best teams in the league right now. And your number 1, no surprise to anyone, I'm sure, is going to be the Houston Roughnecks. This team beat the Renegades last week, 27-20 on the road. Good win there. And once again, they are 4-0. And last week, once again, they were also number 1. Top quarterback was Walker, 25 for 41, 239 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception, and he continues to play very well, no doubt about it. Top running back was Butler, 11 attempts for 39 yards, and their top wide receiver was Hawley, 8 receptions for 97 yards and 1 touchdown. And next week they got the Dragons at home, so it looks like that'll be a really easy game, considering I've got the Dragons ranked as my number 8 team currently in the league. So it looks like they'll be playing the worst team in the league in my opinion, but certainly the Dragons can really pull anything out anywhere. I don't have any doubt that the Dragons could win that game, but certainly I think the Roughnecks are the better team in the end right now. Nonetheless, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on these rankings. That about wraps up this video. Once again, sorry that I did not get this out to you guys earlier on in the week. I've just had a really crazy week, so yeah, it was really tough for me to get this out. But nonetheless, thank you guys all for watching once again. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.